Every obscure small idea that eventually became a global phenomena, an enduring, iconic, cult-like status, from Christianity to CrossFit. Every obscure idea that became a global worldwide phenomena had four stages in common. Those four stages in common were people listen to you or buy your product or service, you have an audience. You bring that audience together to connect with one another, to interact with one another, it becomes a community. When that community comes together to create impact towards a much greater purpose that transcends your product or your profits, it becomes a movement. And when that movement has undying faith in its purpose through sustained rituals, over time it becomes a religion or a cult. Audience, community, movement, religion.
You know it. I know it. 2023 is almost done. This is crazy. 2024 is almost here, but we still have Q4 to rock and roll and make the most out of this time. That's why the new HubSpot Sales Hub is here to sync up everything inside of your operations, your team, and allow for collaboration to happen along the full customer journey so you're not missing a beat. And I'm talking about workspace, your analytics, everything's reporting across the board. So everybody's clued in and delivering as you should, bringing in more revenue. So with this whole thing, there's an AI platform they just rolled out, a conversational platform called ChatSpot. This thing's going to help you write copy using AI, generating emails, posts, so much more. All the stuff that you'd have to manually do, well, that's different now. So tons of integrations, 1,400 plus, tons of ways to integrate features into your workflow. So this is something you want to definitely look into right now for Q4. So now's the time to go make a switch to HubSpot Sales Hub over at HubSpot.com/sales. All right, Lloyd, we're going, man. You're hustling. You've been on show after show, so I'm excited to be chatting with you today, man. You've been busy, and I want to talk about this mission you're on.
Definitely. Thanks for hosting me. I'm super pumped, and you always bring out the energy that you give out. So thanks for having me here, and thanks for the warm welcome.
Yeah, for sure, man. And I mean, your hat speaks for it, and the Lobo hat, that big bright red. The Lobo is always fond in this show. My ex, our old co-host and business partner, his last name's Wolf. So Lobo, it's always been an ongoing thing. So I feel right at home with you there. Yeah, man. So you reached out. I mean, this is pretty cool because not a lot of, we were just talking about this before, is you're on this podcast tour right now. You have a book coming out here that's beautiful, and we'll show it off. Here we go. Here, drop the name really fast, the full title and subtitle.
Definitely. The book is called From Grassroots to Greatness, 13 Rules to Build Iconic Brands with Community-Led Growth to help you skyrocket your business, build a long-term sustainable growth, and also hopefully a movement. So yeah, it's full color, it's designed well. I thought maybe, as somebody who preaches community, the book should have energy. One of the key principles of community is energy, right? And if the book doesn't have energy, then people will probably not sustain reading it to the end.
There you go, man. Well, it's a coffee table book, like we said, and it's something you can just open up a page, it looks like, and boom, you have something brilliant or a little nugget of wisdom,
Exactly.
So I got to give you props because you reached out. I think it was LinkedIn that you've been going hard on, it looks like, and you're on this mission. Like a lot of people who listen here, we've talked a lot about the power of fans community and how it's like this small, mighty group can really do so much for a brand and become like evangelists of a brand. I've had Guy Kawasaki on here, and he talked about it. He used to be the evangelist of Apple, and now for Canva. And he says the same thing, So you're doing it, man, and you're doing it as like a one-man show.
You got to hustle, man. I left the day-to-day of my company, Boast AI, which we had bootstrapped to 8 figures revenue, brought in external investors, growth equity. Me and my co-founder, because we bootstrapped, after selling half the company, cashing out, we still own nearly 40% of the company. Then I left the day-to-day of the company, and as an entrepreneur now, for the last 10 years, working on a few companies that failed and then Boast did well, and building a community, I was used to working non-stop, right? It doesn't end, right? Because you're building a company, you're in parallel building this community, and it's a marathon. And so when I took a break to spend time with family and everything, I had a huge gap. So I'm not used to not doing anything.
Right.
So this book actually gave me something to do, learn new skills, be 0 to 1 again. I'm a pirate at heart. I'm a 0 to 1 guy through and through. And I started to feel like out of place as the company became a Navy after we brought in big company execs, as every company should graduate from going startup or rather pirate startup mode to eventually becoming the Navy, right? Because you need processes and you need to scale, and it's hard to go pirate mode and get to 100 million in revenue, right?
I love that term, pirate mode, too.
Yeah, definitely. All founders are pirates in the early days. What are you doing? You're sticking elbows, you're poking fingers, you're trying to get customers, ship product by any means possible. That's a rush that I really, really love. And that's a rush actually that goes all the way back to my childhood. So the two big inspirations for this book. One is my childhood, right? I was born in Kuwait. My parents are from India. My mom grew up in the slums of Mumbai. And they weren't well off, my parents, right? They moved to Kuwait from India to just make a better living because the currency extended farther. They couldn't immigrate to the US or Canada. They weren't educated enough. And so my childhood summers were spent in the slums of Mumbai, where watching TV was a communal thing because 1 in like 5, 6 of those slums had a TV. And my grandfather had 10 kids. And my mom was one of the oldest and living abroad, so she could bring a TV. And so watching TV was a communal thing. These things were like, these homes were 4, like, I don't know what even to call it, like cement block walls with aluminum or asbestos roofs, and he barely had place for 10 kids, but TV watching was a communal thing. If you cook a little extra, you share it with people. During the summer, puddles were turned into ponds. We'd be swimming in there. Going to the restroom was a communal activity because there was no bathroom in the house. But those were my fondest memories as a child. And every summer when we had to go back to Kuwait, I would cry and didn't want to leave. Fast forward a few years, my mom wakes me up one morning, I was 8, and she says, you can't go to school anymore. A war had broken out. And that was my probably biggest experience with the marvel of community and what a group of determined people can do. Now, I was super excited when she told me you don't have to go back to school. I had a reading disability growing up. I could never study, and it had to be last minute. I studied for a math exam because math was easier than reading for me. And it ended up being a geography exam, which I had no clue. I hadn't studied. I hadn't read anything. So I knew I was going to fail. And so when she said, you don't have to go to school, I'm like, yes, you're never going to find out that I failed. But then when I start to see worry on their faces, I'm like, okay, something's up as an 8-year-old, right? I go down the building with my dad, and I see something amazing happen. In 2023, we just belabor on problems over and over again, right? And it festers and manifests itself into monsters. Back then, they knew it was a gargantuan problem, but everyone's like, let's figure a solution. Every building became a sub-community. So in our building, the conversation was something like, okay, the security had lapsed. There was a time there was no phones. There was no internet. People were like, I'll guard the building from 12 to 6. And somebody else is like, I'll guard for the next 4 hours. Somebody else is like, I'll organize food supplies if you're short. I have some connections. Another person is like, hey, I have extra room if you have relatives displaced. And somebody else is like, no, the school's empty. I have a friend who works in the school. We'll try to coordinate. So every building became a sub-community that coordinated with the next one, the next one, the next one. Word of mouth spread and communicated with embassies, communicated with governments. It became the largest grassroots evacuation movements that took people to safety. And I was going on this bus, this highway, this refugee bus on the highway of death from Kuwait to Baghdad to Jordan. And as an 8-year-old man, I felt so connected to the greater purpose, which was evacuating people to safety, that I felt like a little Rambo. I was moving things around. I never once felt, right? I never once felt that I was a cog in the wheel. I felt like I was driving this thing.
Yeah, you're in it, man.
you're in it, right? I felt like an 8-year-old Rambo. Like I still remember putting the bandana on my head and running around with my dad. It was hilarious. But as I went on this bus from Kuwait to Baghdad to Jordan, on this highway of death, which you can Google and see pictures of, buses were bombed, etc. You weren't sure if you're going to live or die. Currencies were invalid. We weren't sure where we were going and, and how we were going to turn out on the other side. But all the adults in the bus were laughing and singing, playing the guitar. And I realized it's never the destination, and it's neither the journey either. It's the companions that matter the most. With great companions, a crappy journey on the way to hell becomes memorable. And with the best of experiences, like you could be sipping champagne, eating caviar in a chateau in Paris, but with like toxic people, you want to get out of there. So, we always say, oh, it's the journey. It's the journey. No, it's not the journey. No, it's not the destination. It is the companions. That's why you are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. And truly who you surround yourself with, your spouse, your coworkers, your friends, determine your well-being.
Mm-hmm. It's your environment, right? It's everything around you, and yeah, you could, I guess, be in the most ritzy place, and yeah, with the whatever, everything that you ever dreamt of. But yeah, the people, it's the, like you said, the 5 people you surround yourself with, and I fully believe, yeah, it's your surroundings, people, and even some of the place that you choose. It makes all the difference.
It makes all the difference, right? And so, like, think about it. Like, my fondest childhood memories were in the slums of Mumbai, where there was nothing. And I felt happy. So then fast forward a few years, we moved to Canada, we immigrated to Canada, I finished engineering. And I was craving the 2 things that I experienced in that Gulf War. Number 1 was the entrepreneurial spirit. We talk about entrepreneurship like it's all about making money. It's not. The entrepreneurial spirit is about taking an obscure idea to execution and impact while dealing with extreme risk and uncertainty and ambiguity. And there was no riskier, ambiguous, uncertain situation than being in the middle of the war and being a small cog but feeling like you're driving a big impact. No leader there made me feel like I was insignificant. And that drove me. That was entrepreneurial spirit to me. You don't know what's going to happen, but let's do it. Let's create the impact. Let's come together. And the second thing was the power of people and creating that impact, bringing people together. So I graduated university. I didn't want to go and do a typical job. And I'm like, you know what? I don't have the desire to sit and code. I can't do this. I'm craving this excitement, this energy, this pirate, like we were all pirates in the Gulf War. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I asked a few family members who are businessmen. The word entrepreneur wasn't widely used back then in 2004 or 5. The word startup wasn't used widely back then. And they said, hey, the best skill you can learn if you want to do this someday is learn to communicate. And your communication sucks, or you're an awkward engineer. and I asked them, like, hey, what's the best way to learn to communicate? And the word sales kept coming over and over again. Sales is everything. Sales fixes everything. And as I reflect back, I realized one of the key things in life is consistency. If you suck at something, the only way to get better at it is to put yourself in an environment or a situation that forces you to do that something over and over and over again. Because motivation is not for everyone. I'm not self-motivated at all. But taking a job in sales helped me develop the skills, develop the consistency. So I started applying to jobs as an account executive, as a salesperson. I applied to Xerox. You name it. I applied to big companies and small. Nobody would give me a job. They would first find it awkward or weird that like an engineer is applying for this job. You can't really speak well.
It's not normal.
It's not normal. And so I started applying to like really small companies, and a desperate startup gave me a job in cold calling. So I started cold calling. I didn't have the experience. I was nervous. I'll never forget that first cold call I made. I practiced for 4 hours. And literally, when the decision maker answered the phone, I hung up, and everyone started laughing. Yeah. But it's my ego, right? Why can't I cut it in sales as an engineer? I'm a pirate. I kept going. I kept going and going and going, and it just got better and better. And then my next job progressed into sales. My girlfriend then, now wife, was in medical school in New Jersey. So I started applying to jobs in New Jersey. I wanted to be next to her. We've been dating since our teens. She also grew up in Kuwait, was also a refugee of the Gulf War. What are the odds you meet somebody like that? And I'm everything I am because she believed in me, and she paid the bills as a physician for so long.
There you
till
go.
till the outcome. So I go there, take this job in another startup, small company in New Jersey, and next thing I know, actually it's not quite a sales job. I applied for a sales job, I got a sales job, but there was no repeatable, scalable product process. So I needed to talk to customers to figure out what to build. Then I needed to translate that into product requirements. And oh, guess what? By the way, you also need to launch the marketing side and the collateral. Now, most people would say, I didn't sign up for this. Actually, I meet a lot of kids these days, and they're like, I didn't sign up for this, and they just quit.
Yep.
Even if I wanted to, I didn't have the option because I was on a visa. And
you
so
needed that job, yeah. That's right.
I did. Necessity is the mother of all invention. So I start studying about, I'm like, I know cold calling, so I can talk to customers at least. I started walking the sites of these big companies, Tiffany, Armani, Simon & Schuster. Like, I know UX and like wireframing and product requirements from what I learned as a software engineer in university. So let's put these two together. And then it was just a repeatability of doing it. Now, the thing I didn't know was advanced sales techniques beyond the cold calling, right? Marketing, like building a website and all of that. And back then, everything I started Google searching was coming out from HubSpot. HubSpot's inbound marketing community, inbound marketing certification, inbound marketing program. And so that became my next community. I started reading everything from HubSpot and the books they recommended on my drives because I don't enjoy reading. It's hard for me to finish. That's why this book was so hard. But I drive and listen to audiobooks, watch the HubSpot videos. And man, that became my next community. Graduated from there. My wife got into residency, moved to another state. And I started working for another founder. And then we were eventually going to move to San Francisco. And my college buddy, who we were partners in every project, called me and said, hey, I want to do a startup in automating innovation funding and tax credits for businesses. He was working for a Big Four accounting firm. I just jumped at the opportunity to work with him. I mean, I'm like, you're going to work for crazy hours for another founder.
Yep.
You know, why not work with your friend and start something new? We were moving to San Francisco anyway. The hard thing was now I'm like on unemployment.
Well, yeah, and like, yeah, you've had this structure, but yeah, I was going to say the job. Like now you have this opportunity to scale with your own thing and have ownership. But yeah, the job.
Exactly. So reflecting back, right? I think if you have to look at all success comes down to three things: your ability to communicate, your ability to create, and your ability to be consistent. Creation, communication, and consistency. You can be the best communicator or the best creator, but if you're not consistent, you'll get nowhere. And so that experience taught me communication, it taught me creation, and I was forced to be consistent. And so the next thing just gradually made sense, logically made sense, because my best friend from university, we were partners in every project. Just his faith, because I know he was a very calm, calculated, decisive individual, and I'm like bouncing off the walls, high energy. So I'm like, okay, you know what? Yin yang, it works really well, and went on this path to do the business with him. Now, the business we bootstrapped by building a community because, you know, the cold calling didn't work in the early days, and I'll dive into the story, but we bootstrapped to 8 figures ARR by building a community. And when we sold a majority in the company, the acquiring firm, the growth equity firm that bought us, also we met through the community. They came to a community event, and then
that's the thing.
Honestly, they came to a community event, and within weeks the term sheet was signed, and within 3 months the due diligence was wrapped up. And so then over time, you know, transition out of the day-to-day. We brought in a new CEO, brought in new leadership. Me and my co-founder left the day-to-day. My co-founder was CEO, president. My co-founder was CEO, founder, and I was president, founder. He was everything else, and I was the face of the company, product, GTM, etc. And so when I left the company, now for the first time, I came into millions of dollars in money that I had never seen, because you remember all my life, it was like immigrant parents, they didn't do well. They gave us everything. My mom stayed at home to take care of us, and she gave us everything, right? And and working through this journey, relying on my wife to pay the bills and telling her, did a AI chatbot in 2013 ahead of its times, failed, then joined the founding team of another venture-backed company building an AI sales assistant. That failed. Did an events company to bring in dollars, and the co-founder ran away with $250,000 in profits. So had to sue him. By the time he paid us, it was like 50 grand in installments after lawyer fees. It didn't even feel like it hit your bank kind of thing. And so this outcome felt great. And technically, I should have been at the top of the world. But what ended up happening after this was I ended up depressed, and I felt lost, and I felt like I didn't have any purpose. I ended up depressed. I became insufferable. I got out of weight, overweight, all kinds of things. And then when I came back to sanity and good health was also because of a community. It was a fitness community, the Peloton community, a bunch of fit friends. And as I reflected
with others,
the connection with others, right? And there's this research now on blue zones, which are 5 places in the world where people live functionally. Functionally is important. Live functionally to 100. And 4 or 5 out of their 9 traits are all communal things, like eating together, socializing, being a part of a religious group, etc. Right? Community is huge. It impacts your mental health. I mean, loneliness is the #1 killer in America, right?
That's right. Yep. And then now with virtual, there's a lot of lack of community and separation.
Exactly. So as I reflected back, I'm like, all my life I had nothing, and I was happy. The one time in my life where I became a multimillionaire is when I ended up depressed. And it was because I felt like I lost my tribe and money didn't mean anything. And so then I started to see, maybe as an homage, I should write a book about community, because now I'm in such a happy state. I don't have the next startup idea. I'm still a board member, active board member at Boast, and own a significant portion of the company, so evangelizing that. So I'm like, I don't have another idea. And the worst thing is to start a company for the sake of it when you don't have the itch or the passion. But I did have passion for community, and I wanted to educate the world on the power of community. But I'm like, who's going to listen to my story? I'm not some billionaire, right? I'm not some famous person. So I started researching, watching every single of our Traction Conf, which is our community, videos over the last 7 years, like 400 plus videos, and then talking to a lot of community members, community leaders. The count hit 1,000 almost. And I found a very common theme. Every obscure small idea that eventually became a global phenomenon, an enduring, iconic, cult-like status, from Christianity to CrossFit. Every obscure idea that became a global worldwide phenomena had 4 stages in common. And I distilled those learnings into 13 rules to build an enduring, long-standing brand. But those 4 stages in common were: people listen to you or buy your product or service. You have an audience. You bring that audience together to connect with one another, to interact with one another. It becomes a community. When that community comes together to create impact towards a much greater purpose that transcends your product or your profits, it becomes a movement. And when that movement has undying faith in its purpose through sustained rituals, over time it becomes a religion or a cult. Audience, community, movement, religion. And hopefully I've done justice to the stories I talk about in the book, because again, it's hard for me to read or write an academic book, so I had to write it with stories. I have an accompanying Notion workbook where each chapter will have academic like templates, but this book is all about stories to inspire and also give you direction on how to get started A to Z, going from audience to hopefully a cult-like brand someday. I distilled those 4 phases into 13 chapters.
I like it, man. And it seems like you mentioned, it's every movement has these components, and we can look at cults all the way to that people. I mean, there's power in these types of movements, no matter what they are. It could be nefarious or amazing, and it could be in a warlike zone, like you said, where it's like everybody connects around a purpose, and there's this focus, this drive that everybody gets bonded to, and it becomes this like a flywheel. I always imagine like, okay, you get the right people on board on the bus that believe on all these points. It's going to keep that momentum going. I guess speak to that, because you've grown obviously a large business in Boast and also with your own communities. And now with this book, it really doesn't take a lot to like spark that flame, right?
A small group of people driven by an unquenching passion for the purpose can move mountains. They can change the direction of the world. I've seen it at the Gulf War, and I've seen it over and over again. And I don't like to bring religion into this, but there's some truth to it, because it's all human psychology. It's what drives people, right? People drive people. Ultimately, yesterday's innovation always becomes tomorrow's commodity. We latch on to the tech because it creates the buzz so much. But look at this. I'll walk through the journey of tech progression. First, it was all these electronics manufacturers, right? When electronics were commoditized by the Japanese manufacturers, what happened? Harley Davidson almost went bankrupt in the 80s. The leadership came out and said, we're going to rebuild the company on the ethos of community. Employees, leaders went out there and started rider clubs. Employees became riders, riders became employees. As a result of that, they created rituals where people came together as weekend warriors. Then they came together to create impact. Over time, they not only saved Harley, they also created movements and campaigns to donate to breast cancer and autism. They're always doing good.
Yep.
Today, there are very few bands you can say that have sustained and endured to the level of Harley, from going almost bankrupt to where you can recognize a fan just by what they're wearing, right? Like you wear a leather jacket and shoes, and you immediately boots, and you immediately associate that person with a Harley. If they have a specific bike that is not the typical aerodynamic sport bikes, but you have a Harley-like looking bike, no matter what brand it is, you immediately think of Harley. That kind of
black,
brand association,
like dark kind of, it has that color, that vibe. Yeah.
You see any heavy metal guys, you immediately associate with Harley. That happens over time through audience, community, movements, and sustained rituals that create cult-like energy. And so then you look at that progression. Then let's go back to 2000, right? Everyone was saying .com company. We don't say .com company anymore. Then we started saying cloud company and social company and mobile company. We don't say those things anymore. Now the latest fad is AI. We're saying AI, AI, AI. How do you think OpenAI built OpenAI? With the power of community. This is open source. We were all giving our data. Boast AI was part of the OpenAI community in 2019. They have everyone's data. Without the community, your ChatGPT wouldn't be here. And
it's
that's
a
what
neural
I'm trying
network. It's everything combined. Yeah.
Exactly. Like without people giving and contributing, it wouldn't be here. And so through this, I wanted to also convey that, hey, we built a successful AI company by leveraging the power of community. Ultimately, yesterday's innovation, it will always become tomorrow's commodity. But if you build a community, you will not become a commodity. Look at every brand that has sustained over time, become enduring. It's the human-to-human connection that drives it. But people don't see it, right?
I love it, man. And because this is a common theme that comes up with AI, because we talk a lot of marketers, a lot of creators listening, and entrepreneurs that are looking to scale time and always testing the newest thing, the newest tool. And it's easy to get lost in all that stuff and then think that, it's all going to automate everything. These tools, they're so smart. They're going to keep learning, how I write. But we can't lose touch of the human side. Big announcement here. The Hustle and Flowchart podcast is now the newest podcast on the HubSpot podcast network. They're the audio destination for business professionals. It's exactly why I joined the network, to expand what we've been doing here, making business the fuel for your life, not the stressor or the burnout. We want to build fun and make business a big part of who we are and our expression out to others. So you're going to expect a lot more curated guests and that sync up with this mission. Also, more topics and episodes from me. And I want you to keep listening to the Hustle and Flowchart podcast. Go check out other shows on the HubSpot podcast network at hubspot.com/podcast network. I'm curious of your thoughts as technology keeps speeding up. The power community seems like it's getting even more valuable if you focus there.
You know what's happening in 2023? Marketing is taking a bloodbath, right? People are spending less and less on marketing. CPMs are up, right? TikTok, Facebook. Now Google's gonna sunset this cookieing thing, so you got to own your audiences. People, consumers, I'm actually happy about all of this because consumers are tired of spam, of clickbait, of seeing the same thing over and over again, of giving their personal data to access crappy white papers. And now with every time new technology comes out or a new growth strategy comes out, right, a growth tactic comes out, it gets copied and it turns into spam, like sending cold emails or now copying from ChatGPT. People are blatantly copying, and you can tell, right? We have the sea of sameness. Your community is your biggest brand differentiator, especially in a time where no two products like are different anymore. We used to say no two products are the same, but no two products are different anymore, right? You can go, there are marketplaces where you can buy the skins of other platforms and then just run small dollars on it, and you can launch another product, right? No code, low code has made it so easy to build product. What's hard is creating an audience, creating a community, but that's your biggest moat. And the biggest brands know this, right? Shopify knows this. Nike knows this. Apple knows this. Tesla knows this. If you follow any of their journeys, what did Elon Musk do? Create an audience. Why do you think he went out there and started evangelizing this?
Yeah.
And then through that audience, he brought people together and created a community. And then through that community, he drove people to invest in electric vehicles and energy efficiency.
The purpose behind it.
Exactly. Yep. And it became a movement. And now these rituals started to form around Tesla. And over time, it has become a cult. Whether you love him or you hate him, there is very little difference between his strategy or some of the biggest religious leaders to some of the biggest movements, how they went from audience to community, to movement, to cult or religion.
Yeah, and there's no question why he got Twitter or X, why he got this massive community, this social network, and now has the ability to enhance that. Obviously, he has his own mission to get rid of the bots and all that, but he's focused on people, on community, but obviously backed with the best and latest technology.
People create companies, people create technologies, people create movements, people create impact. Technologies don't. Until we live in a world where robots are buying from robots, the people-to-people connection will only increase. Let me give you another example. With all the ChatGPT and all the generative AI and all these talks around the world, what do you engage with in your personal time? When you're doom scrolling, let's say on the pot in the toilet, or at late night at bed. When you're doom scrolling, do you engage with brands more or do you engage with people more?
I would say people.
You're scrolling through people's content, right?
Yeah, it's all people. Get those ads, but come on, it's people that you're looking for.
On LinkedIn, look at brand engagement. Look at individual engagement. You're commenting, you're engaging, you're interacting with brands more or people more. This is what people don't understand is like until we live in a world where robots are buying from robots, the people to people connection is going to be irreplaceable, especially after COVID, right?
Yeah.
And I'll walk through the journey of how actually we landed on it at Boast.
Let's do that. Yeah, that'd be a cool little case study.
Yeah, so because I can talk about Tesla and Apple and all these people that are in the book. The issue is it might not be relatable to a lot of people because they're like, if Tesla or Apple or Nike were all starting out right now, it would be more relatable. But those stories may be like, man, it's such a high platitude, even if I break it down, that it's like the immediate goal should be attainable sometimes, right? So I can talk about us because we leverage the power of community to bootstrap with no investor money to 10 million ARR. We had no marketing team when we got there. And we had
Did you have an existing audience at all?
No, nothing. 35 people. So I'll take it from scratch. Scratch. We had no audience. So I moved to Calgary, Alberta, Canada, from San Francisco, where my co-founder Alex Popa was there. His wife was articling, so he had to be there. So, I said, I quit my job. My wife moved to San Francisco. She was now doing a fellowship, working long hours anyway. So I went and camped out in his house. I was on EI. I go there. We decided to do this thing, get people's data in exchange, give them R&D money from the government. Big Four accounting firms were our competitors. They were doing it. So the first thing you do is, how do you figure out who you're going to target? The only way we knew was pick up the phone and dial for dollars. We started calling manufacturing and construction. Oil and gas was huge. Nobody would talk to us, man. Imagine two guys you've never heard of saying, hey, give me your data. I'll get you money from the government that you won't pay interest on and you won't give up equity on. The most non-dilutive form of capital ever. They're like,
wow,
this doesn't sound real, number one. And the people that did know about it, because the Canadian government gives over $3 billion a year in these R&D tax credits and innovation funding programs, they were already working with Big Four accounting firms. So they're like, why should we trust you? So we're like, okay, what's the next phase here? Let's go and start storming the events of oil and gas, construction, manufacturing. We started going to all these events. The problem was we didn't resonate with them, man. Didn't feel like a tribe. It was, the conversations felt forced. And I still remember we felt like, two guys forcibly putting a suit on top of hoodies while these guys were all like, at a certain place where it was the old boys club.
Yeah, you weren't in that club, man. Yeah.
We couldn't fit in. It didn't feel like our tribe. So dejected, we started going to the local startup events. And instant resonation. We're like, wow, it feels like we found our tribe. People were so welcoming. We were having the same kind of conversations. Everyone was at the same level, more or less, like zero or a little beyond zero. And it was great. We started, those initial hangouts at the startup events turned into them becoming our friends because, our spouses, his wife was articling lawyer. My wife was a doctor. She wasn't there. The business was our life, and this community became our friends, our second family. So we started hanging out with them, partying together on the weekends, participating in hackathons. And wow, it felt like, man, that 1 year just went by. It felt like our tribe, and it also didn't feel like work. And so, I'll stop by and share a few frameworks as we go along, because when we were in that journey, it always felt like I'm throwing spaghetti on the wall. Now, when you reflect back, when you've made some money, it all seems like, oh, it's a profound framework. But in reality, everyone's throwing spaghetti on the wall when you're in it. Yeah. It's a mess. And then when you reflect back, and you can only reflect back positively if you made some money and it was successful. Then you're like, oh, it was a framework, right? If it fails, it's not a framework. It's a lesson. But nonetheless, so you're starting out. You have no customers. You have no idea what you're going to do. You know what to build. You don't know what to build, etc. Where do you start? The first step is to figure out, who do I even target? Now, how do you figure out who to target? What I realized is, one, do you love that audience? Do you have a passion for that audience? Building a company and building a community is a long-term sustainable thing. It's a multi-year thing. It's a marathon of the heart and mind. It's a labor of love. Especially community, when volunteers are involved and all of that. If you don't love the audience you're serving, if you hate the audience you're serving, how are you going to go on for long? Money will only be a motivating factor for so long until you start like frictioning with your customers, with your audience. So one is passion. Do I love this audience? Because you got to create consistently. If you hate the audience, you can't create. It's the reason why I love this audience so much that on my 59th podcast, I still have this level of energy, right? It's passion. The second thing is it a sizable niche or is it a small niche that's growing? That is very key, because when you have small underserved niches, you can find white space and create easily for them. The third is there a propensity to pay? Because if people don't pay you, you can love the community all you want, and you can love the audience all you want, but it can be the largest ICP on the planet, but if there's no propensity to pay, you're gonna fail, right? You're gonna burn out. It's not a business. And the fourth one is ease of access. Now you can have all of the three above, but if there's no ease of access, you're done. So look at that back there. We wanted to target oil and gas or manufacturing, stable businesses, large markets, and propensity to pay. No passion for it, and no ease of access. Gravitated towards startups. Now, the second thing that followed was we started spending so much time with these startups and with these founders. They became friends of ours. We understood where they ate, how they breathe, eat, drink, sleep, where they hung out, who their friends were. We understood what their problems were, but problems are very short term most of the time. What their goals were, and beyond goals, what their aspirations were. Because The aspiration is a forever, right? Your aspiration will last beyond you as a company. And so we found two big white spaces there. This is 2012. Number one, all of the events we went to, while great, they were high-level CEO platitudes. Hey, somebody talking 50,000 foot. Now, if I've decided to start a business, I don't need inspiration. I need tactics. How do I get my first 10 customers? How do I launch a product, et cetera, et cetera.
Pirate mode.
Pirate mode. None of the content there we were getting from the events, and I suspect it was because the events were organized not by founders, but by event organizers. And so they brought the highest social proof speaker who was like, if somebody's at 50 million, if I bring Elon Musk to talk to a bunch of founders, he will inspire them for sure. Mm-hmm. But how will he give them specific tactics when he's not in it anymore? And even the founders on the floor will find it so hard to resonate in the sense like, dude, he's saying XYZ advice because he's Elon Musk. Like, step in our shoes. We're 0. How do we get to like 1? Or how do we get to 5? Only somebody who's immediately at 5. Like, if you're at a level 1, you need help from a level 3 or 4, not from a level 10 or a level 50, right?
It's too far off. Yeah, you want just a little bit more.
Exactly. So that was one thing we noticed. And the other thing was the media wasn't covering startups. No service provider would service them. In fact, we got made fun of a lot by competitors who said, you guys are going to go bankrupt. These guys never will pay. Now, that bet we made played out because startups end up being one of the fastest growing segments, and it boomed our business because they grew. They invested in innovation. We invested in them with our time and love. They grew. Our business grew. And now, today, when you look back, these guys who used to say, oh, you're silly for going after them, we're like, you don't want to service them. Your customers don't want to work with us. So we can only serve our community, our kind.
Yeah.
Now, fast forward to 2023, all these accounting firms, et cetera, they all have startup programs and want startup rates. And I'm like, whatever, right? But back then, there wasn't the help.
Yeah.
And the second gap, right, was that there was no help. There was no voice for them. So we said, how do we address these two gaps? Gap number one, we started hosting our own meetups. We started inviting people who were at immediate 2-3 levels above the level our audience was at, and started bringing tactical content. How do I get my first customers? How do I land my first enterprise deal? Those kinds of things. Our messages went from buying my stuff to now we knew people in the community would be like, hey, we're hosting this meetup with Joe. He's going to talk about how do you do your launch campaign for your product, or how do you get into TechCrunch first PR. And we got 10 spots. It's at our co-working space. There's going to be free pizza. Pizza then $20 would feed 10 people, right? $30.
Yeah, enough.
A lot of people. Yeah. Enough, right? And 10 people would show up. Now, the one thing I talked about earlier is creation, communication, and consistency. We never stopped. We kept doing those meetups despite 10 people would show up. And more people would show up, 15, 20, more and more people would show up. One day, we had 200 people show up at a co-working space for an event we did. We hijacked all the aisles, and the guys at the co-working space are like, listen, this is not a pizza meetup anymore. You can't do this. You can't hustle your way into paying no venue fees and all of that stuff. You got to
take over the whole place. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to go now full blown, right? You got to get out of here and find a venue if you want to do this size event. That gave us great validation that we had this community growing. Now, in parallel, we reached out to the local newspaper. And we said, hey, why don't you give us a column? We'll cover startups. And they're like, man, it's not even a priority. Whatever. So, again, in hustle mode, leverage our network to guest blog for a couple of other highly trafficked websites. There was a local Canadian blog called Tech Vibes at the time. And, I didn't have any experience, so I couldn't talk about my experience doing startups like a Neil Patel or like a Jason Fried or Jason Lemkin. So I started covering other startups. And when you cover other startups that haven't been covered, what do? They share it. So that first post I did of covering other startups got socialized so much that I used the social proof of that, saying, hey, look at how many retweets it's gotten. I can get it for your newspaper. You tap it at a whole new audience. They're like, fine, we'll give you a column. Now, strategically, I called that first column Startup of the Week. It created this thing where you had to apply, and it was in the newspaper. Now, the newspaper never committed to give me beyond that first write-up, okay?
You're forcing it to happen. I can see it already.
Yeah. I'm fortunate it happened, but I wrote Startup of the Week, put it out there. They just gave a blog. And I put, if you're interested in being featured, apply here. Put a Wufoo form, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And when I shared it with the startup I'd covered, he was so excited because it's in the local newspaper, in the national, like one of the biggest newspapers. And it's love for startups, which never happened before there in the media in that way. And it was Startup of the Week. So it meant something, right? Like you're something of something. Like you're the best of this. You're the best Startup of the Week. And there's so many.
Yeah.
So he shared it. And that sort of went mini viral. The editor, I'll never forget that day, called me and said, listen, man, if you commit to writing this every week, I will make it a print column.
All right.
And now this created a boomerang effect for our community because, one, I could not write any type of content in a short period of time to drive SEO juice to my website, right? Like it's an obscure new domain.
Yeah.
What could I have done to drive like the domain authority other than getting a backlink every week from the highest domain authority website in all of Canada? That was number one. Newspaper website.
Yeah.
The second thing is instant credibility. We went from being two obscure guys to the local newspaper believes that they're good guys, so they write a column. Number three was our email database started building because people started submitting that Wufoo form to be featured. Number four, in a weird way, we found like these entrepreneurs waking up early in the morning on Mondays, every Monday, to go and buy physical newspapers. Physical newspaper is a credibility factor, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because everyone has a blog, but now you're in the newspaper. That's a credibility. That buy these newspapers, give it to their family members, that take pictures, that share it. And so that boomerang effect of people started applying, we'd get the opportunity to invite more people to our events. People started applying, etc. And that grew our community. Over time, it evolved into a conference and a community. We called it Traction because it was tied to the aspiration of our ideal customers. Mm-hmm. Our customers want money for what? To innovate faster. For what? To create impact. And our purpose became enabling innovators to change the world. Every dollar spent in innovation returns 20 to the universe. Vaccines, robots, clean drinking water is a function of innovation. Yet 99% of the innovations die on the vine. So that became our purpose. That's why we're doing it. The mission became enabling them through content and capital, right? Through the know-how, the funding and the know-how. The vision became accelerating innovation, and then the values were all community-centric around building connection, giving people the autonomy, driving energy, recognition, having a great purpose, those kinds of things. Yeah. And that took us, just the consistent effort there, right? Like everyone says, I agree. I'm the first one to say luck is a huge part of everything. The fact that our investors came during an event we did during the pandemic and end up making us rich is luck.
Yeah.
Now, luck and risk are two sides of the same coin. You know what the difference is? Most people do not flip enough. If you keep flipping the damn coin over and over and over again, even the broken clock is right twice a day, you might get lucky someday. We just never stopped flipping. We kept doing those events. And when the pandemic hit, we took all our events online, and rather than doing a one and done 2-day virtual summit, we launched like workshops. We launched AMAs. Every Tuesday, Thursday at 11 a.m., we'd do the same.
There.
We were there. We would do that same meetup that we'd do in person. We'd now do it online. And now hundreds of people started tuning in. I could have done a 2-day virtual summit and called it a day, but imagine now you got to do it twice a week, so you're top of mind twice a week for people rather than once a year, right? Yep. During a virtual summit. Our audience that was entirely formed through meetups and conferences in person now became digital. Our subscriber base grew from 30,000 some odd subscribers to over 100,000 subscribers. The first window of the pandemic when something opened, we hosted an event. These investors came, decided to buy a majority stake in the company. So that was the epic journey driven entirely by the power of community and doing two simple things.
Showing up. Yeah.
Consistency. If you're consistent for people, they'll show up in the same way. You want to get lucky, keep flipping the coin. Risk is on the other side. Just make sure. Just keep taking that risk. Keep taking that risk. Keep taking that risk. You will get lucky. I truly believe luck is the 10% that flips everything in your favor. Yeah. But to get to that 10%, you got to keep going. You got to keep going. It's consistency.
Yeah, man. And that's the thing. It's like it's like a VC, right? Like that's why they invest in, let's say, 10 companies, and then one of them can make everything in the black and scale to the moon, and same thing with what you just said. You keep showing up, and what do you know? The right people show up right at the right time. But the right time was you built that. You made that happen. It wasn't just pure luck out of nowhere. You actually showed up and created that space for that to happen.
Exactly, because one of the other key frameworks here is when you understand your customer really well, you also understand a few more things about them, right? You understand who do they follow, who are the influencers they respect, who do they fund, meaning who are the other tools they buy from, and where do they frequent, what events they go to, what platforms they hang out on, what magazines they read. When you have a list of all those around your ICP, when you understand the circle of influence around your ICP, then when you do events, you know who I should invite as speakers, where I should distribute it, who are the service providers, other people they buy tools from that I can co-host from or invite as sponsors. And so when you go to, when your ICP comes to your event, it feels like it's their tribe.
Yeah, man.
It's the same reason why we didn't felt that tribe-like feeling at a manufacturing event, but we felt it going to startup events. But like you can deliberately engineer this by understanding who do they fund, who do they follow, who do they frequent, what do they frequent, and you can create this circle of influence. And then it's all about you understand the customer, you know 100 burning questions about them. If you had to write an encyclopedia or the ultimate guide to XYZ aspiration, what would be the chapters, sub-chapters, and key topics? Start building that audience through content, right? Maybe one video can turn into tweets, short form video, podcast, LinkedIn description, summaries, all of that. Start building that audience. Then open it up. Open up these chats to more like AMA style where people can interact with one another. Start bringing them together. Start doing meetups. There's a great value in person, right? Yeah. Anytime you incorporate more than 2 senses, you start to build stronger connections, where sound and sight would be taste, touch, smell. So you start bringing these people together, then offer up a greater purpose that they can come together. Because I truly believe everyone wants to do good in the world. It's just life happens, the system happens, taxes, mortgage,
focus
family.
Is all over the place.
Focus is all over the place. I get busy, so I can't donate everything. But if you align them with a greater purpose that's far greater than profits, everyone will want to give time. As long as they, even the lowest common denominator fields in a small way, they're contributing to something large. It's like the President Kennedy example. He was walking the floors at NASA, and he sees a janitor sweeping at midnight. And he's like, "What are you doing at this hour?" And he says, "Sir, I'm putting a man on the moon." That is purpose, man. That's why that's the purpose with why an 8-year-old felt like Rambo throwing a red bandana over his head during the Gulf War. I felt like I was driving it. Great leaders cascade purpose, not financial goals. And
that's right, man. And that's it. Yeah, it's the finances are finite, but it's that purpose can live on forever, as with the people, and the missions behind us all. So, Lloyd, dude, you've dropped a lot of knowledge, and thank you for being so open to a case study. And I know this is the message that I've been putting out there on the podcast side, and I love that you basically, this is how to build a business, and one that lasts and that attracts the right people, all the way from not only the people that are following, but to the people investing in your company as well, making you rich. So how much better is that? It's like the full spectrum. I can't wait to dive into your book too, the 13 rules to build iconic brands with community-led growth. It's beautiful.
Send me your address. This book is for my mom in many ways. So I gave the inspiration of why I picked community to write about, because it's my DNA. I'm everything I am because of the community. The only time where I felt I had everything and I got depressed was when the community left me. So I went on this quest. But this book actually I wrote for my mom. I had great difficulty reading and writing, and my mom was told many times by people that her son would amount to nothing. My wife's a bright doctor. Like, she got into med school in second year of undergrad without MCATs, and bright as hell. I was unemployed when we were getting married, and she was told that, effectively my mom took it as she didn't raise me well. And my mom asked me this one question: did I give up my career to stay at home to raise you, to hear that I didn't raise you well, that you'll not amount to anything? And one startup after the second, after doing an events company that also went bust, I never stopped. That woman's question that raised me, that gave me everything growing up, was what drove me. But when the money came, it didn't really feel like I did justice to that question. Did I not raise you right? I mean, I don't have a master's degree. I didn't finish high school. I finagled myself into engineering school, which was luck again. But writing this book with the goal of making it a bestseller, the first print of the hard copy with bestsellers for mom, to say that, hey, I may not have that master's degree. I may have just finagled myself into engineering, but you didn't stay at home for nothing to raise me.
Nice.
Some of the smartest people in the world, who are some of the most educated people in the world, are reading your son's book. And this is because of you.
Dude, from grassroots to greatness for your mom. That's like the perfect way to end it too. And it's the best purpose to even put this out there and share it. So I know there's a lot of people feeling that way. And hey man, it's pirate mode got you here. And, there's that flow state, but that pirate mode keeps the engine cooking, So thanks for sharing that, Lloyd.
It's a great way for me to get into pirate mode. I mean, like me, a couple of contractors, but me doing the outreaches, me hitting up the press, hitting up podcasters like you.
You're still doing it. Yeah. Yeah.
Never stop, man. Never stop. It's always important to understand what your zone of genius is and bring in help for things that are not your zone of genius, and then just never stop. If you never stop, something will work out someday. And I got a lot of love. Yeah. It's bound to happen. I mean, in the pre-sale, it hit top new release in the business, in the marketing, in a bunch of categories. So, hope is up. But I made it 99 cents. I could have made it free. The digital copy is 99 cents. I could have made it free. The issue with free is I have to spread it. When it's 99 cents, the reviews become verified and Amazon spreads it. And all the other content, podcast interviews, the Notion workbook with templates for each chapter is going to be free behind a sign up, whether you buy the book or not. So I want people to understand that brands of yesterday were built on what they told the world about themselves, and brands of the future will be built on what the people, the community, the world says about them. If you build a community, you will not become a commodity. Check out the book on From Grassroots to Greatness.com. And I'm on LinkedIn, Lloyed Lobo. My DMs are open. I am active there.
Yeah, you are. I appreciate you, my friend, and I can't wait to read this. Everybody go check it out. And we'll be chatting soon. Go follow him on LinkedIn. You won't miss him, and you'll have fun doing the whole thing too. So, Lloyd, have a good one, man. Thank you.